Hello, hello. It is now 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, at least. Um, I'm coming to you from Little Rock, Arkansas. Where is everybody else from? I'd be curious to see in the chat. Delaware, Oklahoma City, I was born there. Nebraska, Georgia, Louisiana. I got a lot of neighbors here. Well, it is 12 o'clock, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. Michelle, is it okay if I share my screen? Yes? Okay, here we go. You guys see this? Let me get my head out of the way here and go to full screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. It's hard to tell when you're running your own thing. Let's see. Is there a comment? Yes. Okay. Cool. Well, welcome again. My name is Ginny Blankenship, and I am the founder and lead strategist for Lightmaker Grants and Strategy. And over the past 20 something years, I guess, I have been fortunate to raise almost $10 million for education, youth, and workforce development programs across the country. And I was honored to be invited by Sabrina earlier this year to share a little bit of the secrets to making your proposals more competitive in today's landscape. So I'm still honored to be here and thinking about her today as she was so great at elevating other people's voices and putting things like this together. So Sabrina, I know you can hear us, and we're just glad to be celebrating you still. So let me move on to the next slide, and we can talk about, oh gosh, go to the next slide. Um, Four key issues that are really critical to making sure that your proposals are competitive. And we only have so much time to cover this today. And I know a lot of the other presenters have done a great job at really diving deep into a couple of these. So be sure to go back and watch some of the recordings if you missed it. But today I'm going to talk about grant readiness, strategic alignment with the best fit funders and their priorities, your positioning and storytelling, and then systems and tools. So we really only get about 45 minutes before we're kicked out of the breakout sessions, and I want to leave enough time for us to just talk. You can ask questions, share stories about things that have worked for you and your nonprofits. So we'll do that at the end. But if you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll try to see that you've done so. So the grant funding landscape is, as you might know, more competitive than ever this year. According to Instrumental, there are over 50,000 private foundations in the US today, and they collectively have trillions of dollars in assets, and they have to give away a certain percentage of that every year. But now we're seeing hundreds or sometimes thousands of applications for a single grant now. And there's only so many awards that can go around, right? So reviewers are really becoming inundated with proposals now. And there are a couple of reasons for that. You know that the federal grant landscape has really changed this year. That's also trickled down to state grants and municipal grants and contracts. A lot of programs have seen severe cuts. A lot of grants have been, gone away with, or if they're still available, you get maybe 8 days to apply for them now. So it's really hard for people to rely on government grants this year. And a lot of those nonprofits are now turning to private foundations to help diversify their revenue base. So that's made it a lot more competitive. Um, and you may know some nonprofits that have tried what I call the spaghetti method, right? You just throw a lot of proposals up against the wall and see what sticks. Apply for the same, put the same proposal out to every foundation in town or in your state. And that's really just going to result in wearing you and your team out. And we have to be a lot more strategic about getting ourselves grant ready and then making sure that we're making the best use of our very limited time as nonprofits, or as consultants, to make sure that you have a better chance of winning some of these highly competitive awards. So one of the first key things that you have to have in place is just your general grant readiness. And that sounds obvious for organizations that are new nonprofits or maybe new to the grant the grant and fundraising process. But I've found that this is really true for a lot of established organizations too, that they may have received millions of dollars in donations over the years, but they got it from different sources besides grants. And now they're looking to diversify their funding streams too, but they're not even grant ready. So I'm a consultant, and one of the first things that I do with my clients is we go through a checklist to make sure that you have all the documentation that you need. You have your board bios, you have your program narratives, and things like that. Um, and one of the things that a lot of nonprofits really struggle with is just being clear about who they are, um, why they do what they do, how they do it, and what is the impact. And if you're not super clear with that, your reviewer is not going to understand. Um, why they should fund you above all the other thousands of people in their queue. So just getting really clear with your who, what, why, where, all of that, and using that kind of language consistently in your applications. Another C is capacity. Does your organization actually have the systems and staff to deliver what you're promising to do with this grant? Um, Are you asking for too little money to achieve it if you don't have other sources of revenue? Are you asking for too much? And how do you know? How else will you reach your fundraising goals and show a funder that you are going to be sustainable over time? Because foundations don't generally want to be the single grant that funds your entire program. They want to see that other organizations have um, skin in the game, and that it's not all going to be falling on one foundation to keep that program going. And then another issue is your credibility. Do you have data that shows that you're making an impact? How are you measuring it? Do you have a track record of raising and managing money? And how can you demonstrate that? So, a lot of foundations, it takes a couple of years for them to see you as a credible organization. Um, it may take 2 or 3 years of applying for a grant before you even hear back from that foundation. And that's totally normal. So if you get declined from a grant, don't let it deter you from trying again the next year. You tighten up your proposal, ask for feedback if you can, but just keep building that relationship with the funder, because that will build up your credibility in their eyes. And let's see, key two is strategic alignment. So again, we want to avoid the spaghetti method of just throwing stuff out there and hoping that somebody likes your proposal. You want to focus on quality over quantity. So it's often a much better use of your time to write, say, I don't know, 10 really strong proposals to the right kinds of funders that fund exactly what your program does. And this is their funding priority for the year. Just focus on, maybe a handful, a dozen, something like that, instead of writing 50 proposals or sometimes 100 proposals I see organizations trying to crank out, and just really focusing on that quality over quantity. The relationships matter. That's one of the most important pieces of all this, is just making sure that you're talking to funders, you're introducing yourself to program staff to make sure that you are well aligned with their priorities for the year, because it changes over time, especially this year. A lot of foundations have totally changed their strategies over the past 8 months because of the impact of the federal funding chaos. So if you already have those relationships in place, it can be a lot easier to bump up the amount of funding that you're receiving, or at least get on their radar. Um, I have a client that has been receiving funding for the past year from one foundation. And because they have really nurtured that relationship, they were able to receive a $300,000 bonus grant from the foundation just because of that relationship. And they knew that the impact that federal funding cuts had had on them. And we didn't really even have to apply. It was just like a two-page two-page update. So those relationships are really key. The third key to being competitive is your positioning and your storytelling. So you need to be able to clearly articulate the need for what your organization is doing in your community. And there's probably other organizations that do something similar. What is it about your organization, your team, that sets you apart from those other organizations? What is the solution that you're bringing to the table? How is it different? A lot of times foundations talk about wanting to fund innovative organizations. Sometimes too much. Sometimes you don't need to be that innovative. You just need to serve food to people who need to eat. But show that you have a solution that works, and that you have data to show the impact that you're having on the people that you serve. So they can see, what is the potential to make real change over time, because that's what a foundation really wants to fund. Okay. So how do you show your impact? One thing that really hurts a lot of applications is that they sound very um, positive and hopeful, but they don't sound very specific. So it's hard to know, for example, how does an organization help youth succeed in school and prepare them for the future? That's just a very short example to show you. You need to turn that into something that is a clear population that you're serving. What are the activities that you're actually doing? And what are the measurable outcomes? So you might change that introductory statement in your proposal to say something more specific, like, we provide weekly math tutoring to 50 low income ninth graders in Southwest Little Rock, which is where I live. On average, participants grow 2 grade levels in math by the end of the academic year. So that's very clear who you're serving, what you're doing, and what is the main impact and the outcome that you're having. They want to see that really specific information. But at the same time, don't feel like you need to oversell what you're doing. You wouldn't want to promise, for example, that our weekly math tutoring program will ensure that all 50 participants receive scholarships to their first choice of college after 1 year. That would be great if that happened, but you might not be able to achieve something, that that far beyond what your usual outcomes are going to be, if that makes sense. So don't oversell, just make a clear promise of what you think that you can achieve based on your track record and the amount of funding that you're going to have available to do that. Okay, next slide. Readability is really key. Reviewers are often volunteers. Sometimes they have to read, 30, 50 applications over the weekend. Foundation staff is really overwhelmed, like I told you earlier. So they scan through things really quickly, and they're looking for certain keywords that are part of their priorities. So they're looking to see if you've included a lot of those keywords. And you want to make your text really easy to scan. So you want to use consistent headers, use things like bold, underline, italics for different like subheading levels, just to make it easier to kind of read through. You don't have to include really long narrative statements for every single question. It's okay to use things like bullet points with just brief phrases. I think that's fine, because it makes it a lot easier for them to read. You want to lead with your strongest points. So up at the very beginning of the application, which you're usually doing in an online portal at this point. Sometimes you have to submit a proposal narrative in a Word document or something like that, but usually it's online in some kind of portal now. So early in those questions, you want to, again, be very clear about who you are, who you serve, what you want to do for this particular grant, and how much you're asking for, and what you will be able to achieve with that money. So be sure to be very clear and include that up front, because sometimes the reviewer is not even going to get past that. Again, they have too many applications to review, and if you don't catch them right up front, they might just put you aside and go on to the next one. And you want to balance the data that you include with some kind of storytelling. And it doesn't have to be long. When we think of storytelling, that sounds like you're including some, multi-paragraph story or something like that. And that's true when you're dealing with other kinds of fundraising materials and marketing materials, where that can be really helpful. But storytelling in a grant application can be as simple as putting a few really powerful quotes in with your narrative to show this is the impact that this program had on one of our participants last year, or here's what one of our volunteers said about their experience working with our program. So just little ways of kind of bringing your application to life so that they can see the impact, and it's not just those numbers and percentages that are also very important, but it's the storytelling that really becomes memorable to people who are reviewing your application, and that will make you more competitive. And then the final piece I'm going to talk about is just your systems and tools. You can have a great program, great nonprofit organization, beautiful proposals, but none of it matters if your systems are a hot mess, or you have no systems at all. Grant deadlines can be they can be cyclical. Sometimes you only get one shot every year. And if you miss that deadline, then that's one more year that you have to wait on potential funding from an organization that or a foundation that could have been a really good match for what you're doing. So it helps to have someone on staff who is very, very meticulous and organized, but it can't all be up to a single person on your staff or a single volunteer. It can't all be in some person's inbox. You need to have some systems in place where you have at least a shared calendar with grant deadlines, grant report deadlines, things like that. It can be, some people use Google Sheets. If you're a really small, new nonprofit, that's a fine way to get started. Some people use their existing fundraising database system to keep track of grant proposals too. Not all of them are very good at that. So there are other software that I know a lot of my colleagues rely on to keep everything organized. One is called GEMS, Grant Easy Management Software. It's specifically for grants, and you put all of your grant materials in one place. So everybody on your team knows exactly where you stand on different deadlines and who's in charge of what data you need. You can assign different tasks to members on your team. So that's a really great way to set up systems on your team without having to build it yourself. For my team, I'm using something called Airtable, and I'm still pretty new to it, but there are a ton of automations and different integrations you can use with things like Google Calendar. Um, that's what I've been using, and it's free up to a certain point. I think you free for up to 1,000 records per database. So, and then it's only about $20 a month beyond that if you need a little bit more capacity. So I really like Airtable. I have colleagues that like Gems. I use for prospect research, I use something called Instrumental. And it is great for finding all of those grant opportunities that aren't advertised anywhere because 90% of all foundations don't even have websites. So, Instrumental, in addition to letting you research some of those, all of those foundations, there's a way that you can keep track of your grant applications and your spend down for awards within that same software. So that's a good option to use as well. So putting it all together, you've got your grant readiness, your strategic alignment, your positioning and storytelling, and then your systems and tools. If all you can do this month or this quarter is just pick one aspect of each of those four things to work on, it's going to make your um, grant proposals more competitive. It's going to help you build a pipeline of grant applications that you can be prepared for throughout the year. And I know it can feel overwhelming, but just pick one or two things to work on. If you don't have a system in place, that's probably where I would start, is so that you know where all of your documents are, so you know where all of your deadlines are stored in a way that you can't miss. So I want to save, what time is it? Oh, we've got plenty of time. So it's 12:23. I'd love to hear from any of you about what are some of the things that have worked for you to help make your proposals more competitive? What are some things you maybe learned the hard way? Um, let's see if there's any comments. I can share a quick story about one of my clients this year. So this client is an after school and summer program, and they do what you would imagine an after school and summer program does. They provide a safe place for kids to learn and play after school and during the summer months. Um, and they had applied for a grant 3 times to a health focused foundation to fund some of their programming. And it wasn't a real good fit because what they do doesn't seem like it's something that's really health related. It seems like a better fit for an education or a youth development type grant. But they really wanted this grant, and they had been building relationships with the funder to see how can we get our foot in the door with this funder. So what I was able to do with them is kind of work on their positioning and their storytelling so that they could explain to the funder how what they do in their programming is actually really beneficial to kids for their mental health, um, behavioral outcomes, things like attendance, um, self-care, all kinds of health related things that they were doing that they didn't really know how to explain before and tie it to what this foundation prioritized. So we were kind of able to reframe and repackage their current programs. They didn't have to change who they were serving, or what they were doing, but just took a different approach. And in their fourth application, they won. That we won a $200,000 grant from a health focused foundation for them to continue doing their good work in an after school and summer program. Be one comment. We've got a question. Okay, I have some clients. I guess I can stop sharing my screen. I have some clients who are suffering from scale backs due to lack of funding. How do you best continue to portray the organization as grant ready and funding worthy despite budget cuts and reduction in programming? That is a very good question. And my first reaction to that is that you still need to lead with your strengths. If you're still doing good work, your mission still matters. And you don't want to come to a foundation um, kind of reeking of desperation, for lack of a better phrase. The foundation wants to know that you still have your programming on track, even if you've had to scale back a little. Maybe you're not serving quite as many people as you were able to do last year. And that's okay. Most foundations are going to understand that. It is a new landscape this year. Um, so you just want to continue talking to your funders or potential funders and letting them know, look, we've had to make some adjustments this year, but the and maybe we've scaled back some of our strategic planning goals, but we are still committed to our core mission. And this is what we're doing this year, and we would love to partner with you um, to continue or to scale or whatever your goal is. So just keep it really positive and confident, and nurture those relationships. That's the very best thing that you can do this year, because most foundations, they get it. They really get it. They know that people are struggling, um, and a lot of foundations have had to limit the number of grants that they're giving as well. And that's why I tell all the organizations that I work with that you need to approach a grant renewal as if it's a brand new thing. Don't ever take a renewal for granted, because just because you got the funding last year does not mean that you're automatically going to get it again every year at all anymore. Sometimes foundations, they have to pull back and say, well, we're only going to fund these two organizations in our community this year. And then maybe we'll go back and fund these other foundations again the following year. But everyone's having to make really difficult choices. And that's why having a good strategy is so important. I hope that's helpful. I feel you. I wish you luck. And hopefully things are going to kind of even out soon. I think people are adjusting to the new climate that we're going to be living in, at least over the next couple of years, with some of these federal grants. Um, And just do your best to diversify your revenue streams. I know that's easier said than done, but you don't ever want to depend solely on grants in the same way that you don't want to depend solely on events like a gala. You want to have a variety of different income streams. A lot of people are learning that the hard way this year. If they were totally dependent upon federal grants, and now what do? They're gone, and you hadn't prepared for that. That's a real hard lesson for people to learn, but just do your best to complement your grant funding program with an individual campaign, annual campaign for individual giving, corporate sponsorships. I really discourage people from looking at grants as a fundraising strategy. That's a relationship building strategy, but please don't rely on big events to be a big part of your organization's revenue, when you would be better off nurturing relationships with people who already care about you and asking them for unrestricted money. Does anyone else have a question, success story, colossal failure? We've all had them. What are some of the tools that you or your team are using to help stay on top of your grant strategy this year? Instrumental. Love the task function. I haven't used the task function as much because I organize myself in ClickUp, which is not perfect either, but um, I like that Instrumental has that option because it can be more of like a seamless workflow for organizations that have that, and an easy way to delegate out different tasks to people on your team.
For me, I'm I am the team, so I don't use it necessarily that way, but it sends me regular emails with task deadlines. So unless I'm just really got my head in the sand, I'm not going to miss something.
Right.
And you can also do it for things that are far in the future. I can put tasks in for things for next year for a grant. Maybe we didn't get one and I want to reach out to a funder a few months before, things like that too. It's not always just keeping up with tasks that are time sensitive for right now.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite functions of Instrumental.
One of my favorite functions is you can go to your Google Calendar and import the link that has all of the deadlines there. So while you're doing your day-to-day things in your own calendar, you can also see what's coming up too without having to manually update things all the time, which is what I was doing before, keeping my own Google Calendar of deadlines and things, which change often from quarter to quarter and year to year. So all of that you can see on your own calendar, which I love. You can do the same thing in Airtable too. I'm still kind of figuring out how all of that works, but anybody else? If not, oh, I guess I can show my last slide in case you want to get in touch with me. Let's see. Oh, where'd it go? Where'd my browser go? I have too many tabs. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm happy to connect with anyone after the session. If you have any questions or anything that you would like to share, um, feel free to reach out. There are a lot of people who are presenting at this summit who do all of this kind of work for clients all the time. So if you're with a nonprofit and you need somebody to help, be sure to look at the list of presenters and see if there's somebody who might be a good fit for what you need, like with grant research or something like that. Um, and many of them often have webinars that share things like this throughout the year. I know Holly Rustick is really great about doing webinars um, for grant consultants. All right. Um, if there's nothing else, I guess you can head back to the main room. I don't know if there's a wrap up session or anything, but thank you again for coming. I hope you got some value out of my session and about the summit as a whole. And again, thank you, Sabrina, for bringing us all together. Um, we miss you, and hopefully we'll carry on her legacy of lifting other people up in this profession because the work that we all do matters so much. So thank you.